Huzzah! Hi everyone. So great to see you. I think everybody here knows me, but if you're watching later, I'm Dr. Lisa Neher. I'm a composer, mezzo soprano coach based in Portland, and thanks to the internet, connecting with people wherever they are. And I'm super excited to talk about collaboration and designing processes that are collaborative with folks today and make this, interactive. We'll use the chat function. Want to have some time to talk to and answer questions or sort of have discussion. So, don't be shy. Put things in the chat or raise a hand or unmute and ask a question. This is pretty discussion based, and I think that's actually where all the good stuff happens is in conversation, which is kind of the whole point. So I've been really thinking about this idea of collaboration. And as I look back across all the experiences I've had thus far, and this idea that we have in classical music and in all music, but that's my field, classical, so that's what I'll talk about most, is we sort of assume, or a lot of people talk as if by the nature of putting multiple people on stage at the same time playing music written by someone, we must be collaborating. And I personally have felt at many times that that was actually not the case. And I felt that as a composer, I felt that as a performer, and I don't necessarily feel it through any malice of anyone. I don't, it's rarely that. It is more coming to the realization as I look at sort of how the industry works, that for some very understandable reasons, we don't always have the time, the space, or a process of working with one another that allows for actual collaboration. And the thing that then happens, right, is that we all got into this because we had a wonderful experience sometime with art that made us go, yes, I want to do this. And I think that this breakdown sometimes in collaboration can be one of those things that leads us to the nastier places of feeling burned out and really worn out and wondering if it's worth it. So I'd like to forge ahead in more and more of the projects I'm involved in with proactively having these discussions and leading these discussions and setting forth processes. And I'm curious what everyone is going to have to say about what they would like that to include, because it may be very different for different people, and that's part of the point. So if you don't mind, just take a moment or two, and when I think about a project that you were involved in as a musician, or if it's not as a musician, that's okay too, but a project that involved other people in some way that you felt really great about. And I want you to kind of pick apart a little bit what made it so awesome. And we have a pretty decent sized group, so maybe for this we'll use the chat. If people can just share in the chat, what made an experience for you so great? An experience that involved other people in a collaborative project. I'll give you a second and just share in the chat, and we can talk about that. I love this from Martin, that equality among people, different roles, and the buy-in on everyone was on an even scale. That's really great. So there was sounds like the people involved had some defined uh, responsibilities that were shared, and people felt good about that. That's great. Ooh, this is so cool, Kirsten. The idea that the sum is greater than the parts. Exploring astrophysics research through multimedia performance. Yeah, that's super cool. And I think, again, that's like something that drew me to this art form for sure. Yeah, long Zoom conversations about the text that a poet wrote. Yeah, how rich and fulfilling, you know? I remember the first times I said poetry, you're learning how to do this in school, and I found either public domain or maybe existing poetry even wrote and got permission, but I didn't actually talk to the poets. And how much richer it is to actually talk to them. They were awesome people. And yes, some of them were maybe in places where it was harder to chat. Now we're a little more connected, but still, it didn't occur to me at the time. Lowly me, I'm a student. Hmm. Oh, I love this from Elizabeth that you got feedback as well as that performance from a youth orchestra, and then that made you grow as a composer. Great. So personal and artistic growth, feedback, that's conversation. Yeah. You can keep these coming, but I'm also going to throw out another question for you to think about. We'll think about a project, and we're not going to name names here, but a project you didn't feel so good about. And what was it that left you feeling dissatisfied? Okay, so I've got a pro is when performers change your score for the better. Yes, thank goodness for performers changing my scores for the better. And then, yeah, lack of communication is definitely something that will leave us feeling dissatisfied. Everyone involved being great to work with, receptive teachers and students, that's a huge pro. Representing identities and connecting with them to help them feel more represented, that's a huge pro. What a great experience to have. Yeah, this is a tough one. When we maybe have an experience of bringing music that doesn't fit the experience level or the rehearsal time, that can feel really, really tough. And I think most composers have probably had an experience like that. Um, it happens, right? Yeah. Great. Another pro would be compatibility of talents, working with creative partners who have complementary skills. I love that because we can't know everything. Yeah, that's a great one, Nicholas. And Drew's sharing something that's challenging. Long times between communication and performances that haven't happened yet. This is I think, a pretty common challenge for composers. There's an extra layer of the pandemic, but let's not lie to ourselves. This happened before the pandemic too. It's really frustrating. We sweat and work so much, and that's really, really tough. Yeah. Having the right amount of preparation for a performance, not too much. That's a really great point, Paul. There can be too much rehearsal. So having a good amount of rehearsal that doesn't feel over rehearsed and that also accommodated some backgrounds, a wide variety of backgrounds. That's a challenge. So I'm glad that worked out. Um, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Performers do, yeah, of course. Again, I think like most of us know that this is not like someone being malicious. Like composers, we know this. It still hurts, but we all know it. We love performers. Performers love composers, but sometimes things don't work out, and sometimes maybe there could be maybe better communication about something not working out and just moving on sometimes, that I think we can keep work on. Ooh, how things are credited. Yeah, that's a good one, Kirsten. Definitely want to be sure that we're being attentive to everyone's work. Yeah. So I think like some of the common threads I see here is like the importance of communication, the importance of time in different ways, time to talk, time to rehearse, not too much time to get a performance, and the fulfillment of commitments to one another. And also with that, I would add like the idea of honesty if those commitments can't be fulfilled, and sort of having a way to move through those periods, because like it's not all going to be roses and carnations and puppies. Sometimes stuff happens, and sometimes we're being asked for grace, or sometimes we need to ask for grace, and that on its own doesn't have to be super terrible, but do we have some processes for working through that, and how is that handled? Those are things that I see as really common threads here, and I can totally relate to those. um So a few other common ones that I see across the composers that I work with, right, is like a good but not great performance, something that like I have a recording, but I don't really feel like it represents the piece. Should I use the MIDI or should I use this performance? That's a common one that comes up, you know. And once it's been premiered, that second performance can be really challenging, and it can be more challenging without a recording or a representative recording, right? Or a recording that maybe the composer thinks is like pretty close, pretty good, like is a live performance, few mistakes, who cares, but that the performers feel really concerned about and don't want shared, that can be a very thorny discussion, because the needs of the composer to have a pretty good representation might be different than the needs of a performance ensemble to look really excellent in every representation, and that can be a little bit of a challenge. Um, another challenge can be like the premiere happens, but maybe the group or the performance ensemble or the person doesn't really champion the piece necessarily, isn't super enthusiastic, and so the piece maybe kind of dies, like it got that first performance but didn't really get necessarily the championing we were hoping for in a partnership. Another common challenge for composers I see is feedback that comes too late in the process. So feedback that comes on the dress rehearsal the night before or the day of, there's no way to make a change most of the time that the performers will be able to rehearse. So even if it can be incorporated for next time, it's not going to be captured in that premiere. It's not going to be captured in that recording that's often sort of the showy moment. And that can feel really frustrating. And it can also feel very frustrating for composers who sometimes, you know, honestly had to turn in music quite a bit in advance and never heard anything, you know, and I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying this happens, right? And it happens, there's understandable reasons why, right? But it's pretty crummy feeling. So those are some other common challenges that I see. So contributing to these, right? Lack of time, incomplete or lack of communication, or communication that doesn't anticipate certain things that could happen, right? Communication that's kind of limited to maybe just the nuts and bolts, but not the process. Lack of planning or even naming that there is a process we're about to embark on with each other. And what I long for and what I try to create with any project that I'm at all able to control, or control's the wrong word, to influence and discuss the process, is something that builds in a lot more communication and a lot more time or check-in points along the way, rather than what I think we can sometimes get stuck in classical music is a more transactional process. Okay, I have written for you, here it is on the date, I will show up at the dress rehearsal and the performance and you will play it. Nobody means for this to happen, I think, but we can sort of get stuck in these expertise silos where I, as a composer, have the training. I can write for flute and never talk to you. Okay, it'll work okay, but won't work as well as if we talk to each other. And this wonderful flutist can practice and perform, and there's that little thing that's kind of not super idiomatic, but I can kind of make it work, and you know, it'll be fine. And we never spoke to each other, right? And then it happens. So this is something that happens because of lack of time, lack of a discussion ahead of time that we're about to enter a process. So I'm curious, if you wanted to design your ideal way of working on a project, imagine a project that you've done or one that you are about to do or would like to do. And I want you to start making a list. Let's share it in the chat. Share a few of your ideas in the chat, but you can make a list as long as you want in the chat or on your own. What would be some of the things you would put into a process of working with people that you'd feel really good about? What would that look like? I'm hearing that another challenge that came up, I'm catching up on the chat, was that someone didn't get credit in publicity. That's really painful, right? If someone did the work to put in the publicity but didn't include us, that's really crummy. And we're also talking about the importance of making things conversational and shared goals and interests. I love that, Drew, because I do think it starts with, what do we have in common? that's starting this collaboration. That is a great place to start. Summer camp. I'm not totally, I don't know if you can tell me more about that or not. Kirsten, I don't know if that's a pro or con or.
No, Avalock Farm is one instance of a what I call a summer camp where you can go hang out with your performers and eat really
Okay.
good food and go swimming and like make music together. So I think a more
Oh,
holistic process where you just sort of
yes.
try stuff out and see what works.
Okay, great. I've heard good things about it, so I'm glad to hear that that is true. It sounds amazing. Let's all go after COVID.
Yes.
um,
But you could do that at your house too, you know, like when it's safe. It doesn't have to be a
I
specific
actually have
place.
so many dreams of what I'm going to do in this house. We have a house that is beautiful, and it's probably a little larger than two people and a cat need, and I can't wait to use it for house concerts and amazing things. Ooh, the Amani wins, another great model. Okay, good. So models are great. Models are wonderful. Another model I'm going to throw out there is the Gabrielle Lena Frank Creative Academy of Music. If you're not familiar, the format of this has been, I'm not exactly sure how it's modified now with pandemic, but it has been that composers know who they're writing for. They share a draft in progress with Gabriella through video chat, who gives them feedback. There's some more time. We submit drafts, could be a whole piece, could just be sketches. There's some time for the performers to look at it, then meet in person, readings, feedback sessions, show and tells on an instrument, then some more time, and maybe some more feedback from Gabriella if you would like it. A final draft, time to rehearse and give feedback, and a performance. And it unfolds in kind of two in-person sessions, at least it did before the pandemic, with quite a bit of time, multiple months in between. It's a fantastic model for like very high quality learning, excellent performances, true collaboration and sense of like listening and receiving feedback and giving feedback and having time to make alterations. Lovely. Okay, so some things that people, let's keep them going. Things that you want to build into your collaborative process. Conversation with performers to ask about range, techniques, and ideas. Yes. Yeah. What else? Anyone else have things they'd include in their process to share? Is it that scary? Don't be scared.
I'm lazy and don't want to type, but I think I feel very fortunate to be able to write music for friends a lot. And I think that just knowing people personally adds this other exciting layer of collaboration where I'm drawing upon something I know about them or something they're good at, like instrumentally or whatever it is. So I think having an actual relationship with the person is kind of cool too.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I am currently finally, after like 2 years of talking about it, writing a piece for one of my very best friends. And I knew the whole time, like, why didn't we do this sooner? And I'm knowing it again. Like, it's so addictive. It's so fun. It's so amazing. I love her to death. I can't wait. It's gonna be so special. Regular dialogue between collaborators, clearing understanding of people's strengths, mutual excitement about the vision. I love that, Nicholas. Problem solving successfully between people. This is really important. Hey, we're not always going to agree right up the front. Things are going to happen either between us or just in the process, like making stuff's hard, right? And so, yeah, knowing that that's going to happen, having this ability to work through that is super important, and sort of planning for it, planning on a process maybe even for how that would work.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. So you don't want to share mid-project drafts anymore. What's the difference? Do you mind sharing what the difference, Adrienne, is between mid-project drafts versus sketches in your mind? Because I know people use those words differently.
Oh, okay. I think of a mid-project draft as I've completed the piece, but haven't reworked it a lot. And
Hmm.
it's kind of, yeah, like 9 times out of 10, it's awful. And after I send it to maybe one friend and they'll have some comments, it's like, then I can fix things and then it's better. But I think, and maybe I should just make myself vulnerable like that to get that feedback. But on the other hand, that's maybe it's just portions of it that I can share to get feedback on certain parts rather than the whole thing. So I don't know.
I think that's so interesting.
I don't know. And having put out some of, shared some of these awful drafts, I guess that's where I'm getting either feeling vulnerable or inadequate or something, and maybe there's a better way.
Oh, I think I can so relate to that. And that question of like sharing stuff in progress, like when is the useful time to do that? I think that's very valid to consider. And what I think too, like setting the parameters for what we're sharing and why, you
Mm.
know, I actually experienced this as a performer, to be honest, and it influenced my work as a composer. These are always in dialogue, but very late in my doctoral studies, I was actually wasn't even taking lessons anymore, but I was writing my dissertation. I was in round. I was a student still, and my voice teacher was like, "Hey, there's this contemporary ensemble that's coming to campus. Would you like to have a master class with them?" They weren't singers, but they were contemporary musicians. I do a lot of contemporary music. I'm like, oh, cool, that's so great. He put me forward with this master class, and I sang a piece for them. And they really didn't give me very good feedback. They didn't know anything about the voice. They didn't know the piece. They beat me up about rhythm, which then I went back and listened to, and I was right. They were wrong about this tricky rhythm. But it shot my confidence down so low. And I was working through this with actually the very friend that I'm writing a piece now for, and she was like, they had to criticize you. Like that was their job. You went and sang, and they had to come up with something, and it wasn't useful, and they should have come up with something else. But like you walked on stage for 15 minutes, and they had to come up with things you did wrong, even if you didn't come up, like even if there wasn't anything they could notice. And it really made me rethink, who am I going to open myself for criticism to, and why, and how am I going to control? Because I just went in like, here's a piece. Well, what do you think? Like, and as someone who's basically like, I'm a professional now. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but like, maybe it's not for anybody to come and tell me what they think and mess up my headspace. Like maybe that's for a trusted mentor or a trusted friend to be like, tell me what I'm doing wrong in my technique, or how do you think I'm delivering this dramatically, or whatever. So I think the same thing can be true for composers. Like, I would like you to look at this chunk. How is the fingering? Right? Is really different than like, here's a draft. What do you think? Ooh, like that's a tricky question. Maybe we're past reworking the whole piece at that point. So the parameters by which we're giving each other feedback, I think, is really useful to think about. Great. Drew is sharing that something you want to include in your process would be aiding in career goals, like releasing a recording to help everybody, visibility performer and the composer. Yeah, that's wonderful. So one of the things I want to open up to you is like, all the things you're talking about are available to you as something that you can have a conversation about when you're entering into an agreement to work with someone. Yeah, sometimes big wig ensemble comes to us with an opportunity to work with them, and they're setting kind of some parameters, and it looks super official and like we can't change anything. But it's not really true. It's not really true that we can't ask, you know? And the worst thing they can do is say no. Very likely they will say yes to some of it. They might say yes to all of it. And more often, when we are doing things with friends, with folks we know, with people we've worked with before or have a relationship with, it's actually often kind of the reverse, that we don't even have an agreement. We just are like, of course, everyone's going to be wonderful because we know each other, and it kind of mostly works out most of the time. And then we maybe don't even pause to talk about what we're hoping this will look like, and what our expectations for one another might be. And so then we actually, we don't have any kind of like power differential per se that we might feel, whether that's wrong or right, with a huge established organization, that we feel super flattered to be approached by, right? I mean, I don't think that means you should cede what you need at the door. But it's weird how it can actually happen on the other way too, with more casual things. And that's a place where it's wonderful to start practicing these skills. I recently had an experience where I was being offered an opportunity, which I was very excited about, to work with a group, but it was a pretty low commission rate. Honestly, it was something I really couldn't quite afford to take on normally. And so I talked about like what I would like in addition to, and I just made it, I made the discussion kind of couched in not only how I would like to work, but also sort of ways they could increase the compensation that weren't adding to their like money budget line. You know, things like the recording, things like sharing publicity photos if they were already going to take them, you know, that I could use them on my website for promotional purposes and things like that, because, you know, we always need those things. And if they're already spending budget items for that, it could be value added. I didn't get everything I asked for, but I got like 75% of what I asked for, which is pretty good, you know, in just in terms of coming at them with the things I wanted to feel good about that, especially given that I was being paid a lower rate than I would normally need to do that project. But that doesn't mean you can't ask for it, even if you are getting paid the rate that you want to be paid for. And I love this. Yeah, Drew's talking about signing a contract and making an agreement. Yeah, I think it's really important. A contract, an agreement, it's a way of slowing down and double checking. Have we really had a conversation and understood where we're all at? And you can call it agreement if contract seems scary. It's fine. And it can include a lot of things that you wouldn't think about in terms of like financials, right? We're going to respond to emails about this project with one another within 3 business days, unless there's an emergency, right? Or we're both going to promote this project on our social media streams, you know, making at least 2 posts in a week in the month leading up to it. Or, you know, it can be as specific as you've talked about. And then when people look at it and they read it and they feel a little nervous, right? That's good. Feeling a little nervous means you care. It means you know you're about to commit to someone, right? It means you've got skin in the game. You know, and I work on this with my singers too. You know, if you're not a little nervous when you're singing, you're not vulnerable, you're not really sharing yourself. If you're not a little nervous about committing to work with someone, then you're probably not aware of what you're about to agree to, right? So it's good. And it's also a checking point. Oh no, I don't want to do that. Okay, now we're going to talk about it instead of assuming that we both know what we're expecting. And you will still make assumptions and you will still have to re-talk to, oh, I thought we meant this, you know, oh, I did not mean when I said you could change my libretto that you could take this verse and put it at the end. That makes me feel bad, right? Or, oh, I didn't mean when I sent you my draft that you could tell me you hated all the ideas. I don't have time to completely rewrite it. But if it's not playable, then I can change that. You know, we're still going to have those discussions, and we'll get better at having those discussions. But by putting things in writing and pausing, and it takes more time, but it doesn't have to take a ton more time, actually. You know, like it can be, rather than like, we're going to have 1 million hour-long conversations, right? It can be, we're going to spread this project out instead of over 6 weeks, over 3 months, and have a couple little, you know, 15-minute chats and a few more email back and forths, so that by the time I'm writing it 6 weeks later, we've actually clarified it so much that now the process of writing it and performing it is going to go a lot smoother, and we're going to be happier, hopefully, right? Okay.
Yeah.
More questions or contributions? Feel free, if the chat's not available, feel free to just unmute and say something. Okay, so one of the things that I think comes up with all of this, and it already came up, was this idea of vulnerability, right? So to really collaborate is a little scary, because it means we're going to have to be real honest about what we need and what we want, And if you say something that you really need or want, there is a possibility someone does not really need or want that, or might need or want something differently, right? And so this is where I think we get into some trouble sometimes, right? Because anytime you're in a relationship of collaboration, you're in a rehearsal, whatever, and you ask for something and someone gets a little defensive or a little prickly, right? This is actually usually it's that reflection of their own vulnerability and self-doubt, right? Something is going on for them that's being triggered by something you said, or being kind of the impetus, you say something or you request something. Okay, so there's a vulnerability there, right? And likewise, we can feel really vulnerable, like, oh, if I ask for this and it's not playable, I'm a bad composer. Oh, if I, say actually my tempo is this, they're going to tell me that my tempo is not possible, right? All those kinds of things that come up, right, when we have to be willing to share something we care about. And likewise, if we're really going to collaborate, then we have some responsibility to be ready to consider changing something to accommodate somebody else's needs, right? And that's scary too, because we love our pieces, they're our babies, right? Somebody asked me about a piece, like, well, what happens like if you can't get, permission for this text you're dreaming up, and you've already, you read that poem and your brain is already creating a melody and you can't stop it. You're like, no, stop, don't fall in love with that poem. And I'm like, well, it'll be so sad because it's already started to become one of my babies, and I just love it so much. And we care about our music and we pour our hearts and souls into it, right? So, I think sitting with a little of that discomfort, is kind of important when we're about to enter that process, and then also to stay in touch with as we have those conversations, um, and to ask ourselves really honestly too, as composers, am I entering a conversation like with a performer or an ensemble? If I'm in a conversation about feedback, am I willing to change something? And maybe some things yes, and maybe some things no, right? And maybe you won't know that until that conversation happens. But I think it has to go both ways for sure, right? And I think we've probably, if we're performers and composers, if we've been in these rooms, we've probably experienced both sides of that, where maybe, one person's asking for something and the other person thinks that's kind of bullshit, right? And vice versa, So I mean, I don't know, I'm kind of curious, like when you think about like kind of these are some of the most common conversations I think that comes up for composers in rehearsal or in workshop, is that idea of like someone telling us that something's not playable or that they don't like it. Like what comes up for you when you think about those, or any wisdom or any experiences? You don't have to name names, but like what are some experiences that have gone well? What are some experiences that didn't go so well?
I think one thing, it's not, I guess I haven't had bad experiences with performers, and I think that's mostly a function of not having worked with many.
Most performers are fabulous.
Yeah, I think there's maybe more, and this is probably me being, and some of this is me being over being cautious than real reactions, but overly cautious with audiences, and that comes from wanting to write more church music and how to do that. And I think maybe that also had to do with my trying to find a voice, like I have at least three different streams of style going on. There's improvised stuff, there's more church music based stuff, and then there's more modern music based stuff, whatever that means. And integrating all of those, and I don't really, and sometimes having an emphasis one way or the other, it was kind of the wrong style for that situation, I felt like. I'm not sure. Yeah, and
people tell you
collaboration,
that, or was it more like a feel? Or
it's more like well, there's one example which is, I feel like, is really obvious, and it's something that never got past draft. Well, no, I'm not going to mention it because it's
That's
something I
okay.
was working on in middle school, even
Sure, sure.
something where just things that what I was aiming for just wasn't matching up. Well, one thing, this is more, just doing arrangements for church ensembles, just calibrating the difficulty of that. That's something which I've gotten more comfortable with
Good.
setting that and figuring out things that are at their level that I'm also interested in. I remember just for an extreme, I did a arrangement of a Gabriele canzone for a bell choir, and it was not the best bell choir in the world either, but they actually performed it multiple times, and at least one of those performances went well.
Yeah.
But
Good.
then much more simple thing, much later, it was just realizing, this Gustav Holst hymn arrangement is now in the public domain. I'm just going to transfer it over to bells.
Yay.
Yeah, and that one was simple enough. One thing with a text collaborator, which I wish it kind of, it was just not working. And this reflects with what I wrote in the chat, sharing mid-project drafts when the medium makes it feasible or necessary. I feel like there wasn't enough back and forth between me and the text. It was that someone was writing this was a school thing. So it was a collaboration between the composition studio and a creative writing class. And we were all paired up, and there wasn't, I'm not sure what it would have looked like to share drafts back and forth, but it was more a matter of they wrote the story and then I composed to it. And then another time, similar thing, we're paired up with a choreography class. It was more the music and then the dance. But the first thing really was establishing what sort of dance the choreographer wanted to do, just the general style. And that at least I was able to provide, some sketches that they could work with, but with the text, it wasn't really there. And there's a thing with the text, it's just some of the choices made. Well, other than that, with a class setting, we never did anything with rights or whatever. So I suppose the music can, I still might recycle the music or something, but with the text, it's not going to happen.
Sure.
But
sounds like.
But there were just different things with that.
Yeah, you bring up so many things. Thank you, Paul. And I think like one of the things I'm hearing is sort of a transactional sort of setup with some of these things where it's kind of like, again, I think about these expertise silos, right? And look, if everyone feels good about that, fine. But I think many of us kind of long for something more, and it sounds like you longed for something more. And if somebody writes the text in isolation and then you set it in isolation and really feel like you had any ability to really chat and work on it together, that's kind of tough. Sounds like it wasn't really serving your
specific
needs.
Thing, it just bugged me. They decided to write a science fiction story, and then they made up a name for the planet that's actually the name of something else. That was if just that was different, it would, that was just a weird and
care.
just a very minor thing.
Oh, thanks for sharing that, Paul.
Yeah,
I think that's great. And I see, there's some other things you were mentioning were challenges, not enough rehearsal time, maybe because of partly due dates of pieces, the desire to share these drafts as it go. And then of course, like always, who's our next collaborator? And I think that's actually a really wonderful thing too, to think about is that, you don't always get to know in advance if someone's going to be a lifetime collaborator. Like you can go on a date with them, you can go on a couple dates with them, and maybe it will be true love, and maybe it'll just be that one time, right? And I don't think there's any way, honestly, to there's no way to avoid some of that. Like it's a process, right? and if you don't give people a chance who otherwise like seem like, yeah, this seems like pretty worth my time, worth my energy, then you don't meet enough people or try out enough ways of working to find your bosom friend collaborators. So yeah, any other kind of thoughts on this idea of like what comes up when you think about this exchange of like asking someone to make a change and also being willing and trying to figure out our own boundaries about being willing to change our work?
Speaking of boundaries, I think sometimes you can learn skills from your collaborators that you wouldn't have learned otherwise. Um, so I think you just have to remain open to taking on things that you wouldn't have expected necessarily.
I love
And
that so much. Yeah. Uh, we have a rule in like theater, that we'll all try something once and really try it, and obviously with safety and things like that, there's always a boundary for things you feel safe, but that otherwise, like, if the director says, hey, I want you to try coming in from downstage and come in really boisterous and loud, and you're like, my character wouldn't do that, but like before you say my character wouldn't do that, you try it. And 9 times out of 10, if you're thinking my character wouldn't do that, the director goes, wow, that was a bad idea. We're not doing that, But actually, sometimes you go and go, oh, actually, that was a good idea. I can sell that. And I actually just had a conversation with a performer that I'm working on a piece with, and there was a section of the piece where a motive came back and the rhythm was changed. It was the only section of the piece where the rhythm was changed from kind of more triplet based to something more punchy. And they were kind of struggling with it. They were like, I don't really know, like, they were trying to very nicely say, like, why did you do this? This is weird, right? And so they very nicely said it. And I was like, well, these are the reasons why. Like, I wanted to create more, like, it's higher up, it's the most intense moment. I wanted sort of a punch, and yet I wanted it to be recognizable and sort of transforming in this subtle way. And they're like, yeah, they weren't quite buying it. And so like the place we ended up was, as I was having this conversation and thinking, was this composer error? Was this me being like overly complicated for complicated sake? How much do I care? And I was very like, internally, I was thinking, if it's triplets, I don't really mind. Like we already have the intensity and all this. I'm thinking, I'm also going like, is it complexity for complexity's sake? No, I really think it's kind of there's a good reason. I think it was a good idea. I'm not going, oh yeah, that was stupid of me. And so we sort of left it at like, why don't you practice it a little longer, live with it. You've heard my inspiration, see if you find your way into it, and then we'll revisit. And that also gives us both time to sort of sit. And if, as the commissioner, right, if he really doesn't like it, and I don't really mind too much, I'll probably change it, right? But also, I think as a performer, it might just be that he needs to like practice it some more and find like his own motivation for it, and we'll find out what happens, right? And certainly there were parts of that piece where if he would ask me to change, I would have felt much more strongly that I did not want to change it. And then that would have been a different conversation, right? Because I think that's worth thinking about too. We're talking about like what vulnerability you need to bring in, but also what aren't you willing to change? Or how do you know when something is like, I don't want to, that would really make me feel bad? And I think if you really feel bad, right? But also resentment, or starting to really feel this like sense of like compromising your love of some part of the piece, right? Or of some part of that process. Like in that, I'm sort of talking like composers, because I know we're mostly composers, but I felt that way, as a performer too. Like, sure, I'll take that tempo, I'll say to a pianist, and then like, God, it's not working. And then I have to like, if it's really not working and I'm really starting to get pissed about it, it's on me then to say, I really feel like we need to do something different, right? Sometimes you need to kill your darlings. Yes, absolutely, Kirsten. Lovely. So there's a couple great comments here in the chat. Deciding which battles are worth fighting. Yeah, that's basically kind of another way of I love that way of talking about this, whether it's worth fighting for something you really care about, whether it's worth changing. Of course, there's always the chance too that you can change it back if something, you know, for the next performer, if a certain performer wants a change, right? But also the sort of pros of making something more comfortable, more playable, something people will like, you know, it's such a spectrum. And Diana showing that openness to making changes. For instance, you know, play and showing appreciation, Adrienne, for people's work and trying to learn from them. Yeah, and I think those are so wonderful. And really, you know, a lot of the time, I'll share as a performer, if I share something that's really not working for me, the first question in my mind is whether or not a composer is willing to have that discussion with me. And almost if they're willing to have the discussion, it doesn't really matter what we end up on, you know? But if it's the, you know, double forte on my lowest G for 5 billion measures is just not something the voice does. And their response becomes one of those like defensive, well, so-and-so can do it, or well, something, or well, you can have that note. Are you really a soprano or whatever? Well, now this isn't going to go very well because we aren't having a discussion, right? So, so yeah, I think that idea of like showing that appreciation, being conversational, making it a discussion, like Nicholas was saying earlier, having a process for working through challenges and working through differences of perspective is one of the most important things. Okay. So a few things that I've just found very useful in my collaborations, and I'll share those, and then we'll just have a time to chat and have questions and wrap up here. Take these or leave these. It's very tied to the kind of work I do, right? So you may be working in different ways in different circles, but you know, it really starts with who am I inviting to join with me on a project, or how am I getting to know the people who have invited me? You know, have we built that relationship? Even if it's a fairly new person I'm working with, whether we can build in little, you know, Zoom or coffee or whatever conversations. How am I understanding their needs and how am I sharing my needs so that we have a sense of what is serving everyone in this project, and that vision, starting with the needs that are going to be filled by everyone and for everyone, and understanding what the unique gifts and talents of that pool of collaborators are. How do they see them? Not just sharing what I see in them, but also hearing what they love to do, what they like about what I do. Because as Paul was saying, some of us have a pretty wide amount of work that we do. And so if someone approaches me and I'm thinking that they are looking at some part of my work and wanting that kind of collaboration, that kind of piece, but really they want something else that they've heard or experienced, that's an important thing to suss out, right? If it is something where we are co-creating some part of this, to whatever extent it is, listening to one another and incorporating those needs into the project, you know, and Drew was talking about this a little bit, you know, the idea of like, maybe both of you could be served by having a recording sample, and how can we serve those needs? What this really leads to, in my experience, especially with the projects that I have self-produced, is this idea of equal buy-in from everyone. And this is that difference between the transactional experiences that I think many of us have had, maybe that fall more on that, going to our own corner. How do we have equal buy-in? How do we have performers who love the piece and want to do it again and again and again? Or you know, collaborators who want to work with us again, who are wonderful experiences to work with, but who also sing our praises to other people, and we sing their praises to other people, and we uplift everyone and help each other's careers and artistry grow. It's if everybody feels like their needs are being served and that they've been heard. creating that clarity of expectations through discussions, through documentation and reassessing. And it doesn't have to take forever. It will take a little more time than if you don't, but it will be worth it, I think. Pausing to be sure we're on the same page. And especially along areas like rehearsal expectations, what kinds of feedback and when. I will share that one of the most useful things I have done is have a date in my commissioning contracts by which edit requests are required. And what this means usually, I can say this as a performer, if the piece is delivered January 1 and my performance is May 1st, it goes in the back of the binder. And I don't have time to look at it. I might scan it really quick. Good, you didn't do any notes. I can't sing, cool. And I didn't practice it enough to know that some little chunk of it doesn't really work very well, and that's on me. If I have to give you edits requests by Feb 1, you know the last week of January, I'm going to pull it out and start practicing it. But if I don't have that date, I procrastinate like everyone else, and I don't get around to it, right? If you can, with small groups, make that edit date connected to just like a little 30-minute Zoom check-in and playthrough, sight read through, even better, because then you know that we're gonna catch those. Because again, I might just go, I'm gonna look at the score and let you know of my edit dates. And I don't catch things as well as once I start practicing it. I just don't, you know? So I give you these things based on how I know my workflow goes. People catch so many things when they just sight read through and they go, oh no, that finger doesn't work. And you're on the Zoom call and you're like, okay, cool, we'll change it, right? Increasingly, we're all each other's marketers, right? What are your expectations of marketing, of social media, of inviting people to concerts, of mailing lists? What are those expectations, right? And if you're self-producing, don't do it all yourself, right? Ask people to be part of that. You're lifting all boats. Setting up with this expectation discussion that no one is busier than anyone else. A lot of the resentment comes in when somebody doesn't do something that they agreed to, and it's kind of couched in a way because they're feeling bad about it, right? No one's trying to be mean, but it's couched in a way of like this and this and this and all this stuff is happening to me. Literally in the contract, no one is busier than anyone else. We acknowledge that we are all busy. We will acknowledge that we will be true to each other's commitments as much as possible, and that if there is an emergency, we will give each other grace. You know, because everyone has real emergencies. It happens. That idea of being willing to modify our own ideas based on the needs of others, but also that we're going to be honest about the things that we would really feel bad if they were changed. And you know, it's very interesting. People can fall on different places on this. I am very humbled to work with a librettist who is extremely flexible and who has never once asked me to make massive changes to my music. And it works for us, but I'm so humbled by her flexibility because I am always so mortified to ask her if we can change a word here or there. As long as people feel okay about it, as long as it's true to their vision, people can have different places on the spectrum, right? Again, if you're planning your own project, or even if you're not, but you can suggest this, time to celebrate. I think this is so important. I was taught by my mentor, Forrest Pierce, to always have an after party and also to not overlook anyone, the stagehand, the recording engineer, whoever is involved, invite them. It can be a Zoom party right now. You know, Forrest always said, if the performance goes great, wonderful, you can all like share some food and a beverage and congratulate each other. And if something goes terrible, you can all share food and a beverage and laugh about it. And it's just super important. And it's really hard to get that same group of people together again after the fact. It's almost impossible. So, party. Thank people in person or face-to-face. Thank people with an email or a little card. You can get them bulk online at different stores. I get bulk packages of 100 thank you cards. They're super affordable. Most people can afford that. For really special things, I try to give people like a little chocolate bar or a single rose or something like that. But it doesn't have to be expensive. It's just like pausing and thanking people and thanking everyone. Being clear about delivery dates, rehearsal dates, when am I going to get a recording, how I'm going to use that recording, how you can use that recording. if the recording messes up, if we have a horrible thing happen in performance, that they're going to get together and record it away again for you with their iPhone. Better yet, why not record the dress rehearsal? That way you have a backup. And then nobody wants to use the dress rehearsal recording because the performance is better, right? And of course, if something really catastrophic happens, you won't be mean about it. But we'll have a discussion. If the expectation is already there that we're going to share, people just know it going in, and it's much better for people's portfolios in my experience. Front-loading rehearsals, front-loading when you were coming to rehearsals, like at the end of the first rehearsal to answer questions, or at the start of the second rehearsal, not the dress rehearsal only. It's too late. It's way too late to make changes. Trying to think if there's anything else that had come to that. Project leader. This is also pretty important if you're sort of group producing or self-producing. Like, are there project leaders who are kind of responsible for checking in? Oftentimes this is where it gets stickier on the tinier projects, is like it can kind of be weird to try to assign anybody, but then sometimes things don't happen. So just trying to be clear about like who's checking in, who's responsible for what, who's going to make a final call, or who's going to be, you know, I recently was on a project where we kind of, it wasn't quite totally clear. And at a certain point we needed a press release, and I wasn't assuming I was going to do the press release because some other folks were involved in institutions that I thought might want that control, but the institutions didn't want to write it. So then I wrote it, but then they just switched out like the contact info for their institution, and it worked out okay. But if I'd known that, if I thought to ask about it, I could have written the press release a lot earlier, and it would have really made my life a lot easier. If there's something that you're wondering if it's playable or not, that's a chunk I would share early before you fall in love in case you need to change it. Yeah, those are just some of the things in no particular order. Getting consent from performers, Drew is saying. Performers and consent. Kirsten Volness shared a great article in the chat. If the dress rehearsal goes well, that's not good. So, yeah, I can totally share a commission contract. I don't have it like pulled up immediately, so if you email me, Adrienne, I'll send you that, and anybody else who wants it. Anyway, I think like when real wonderful collaboration happens, we know it and it feels so great. And then when it doesn't, sometimes it feels like what happened and it's so surprising. But most of the time, it happens for a reason, because like we actually paused and created a system of some kind, a structure of some kind. And so I think if there's one suggestion I would just plant in your mind is that have that little conversation. How are we going to work together? And what do we need from each other? What are your expectations? And see how that evolves. Everyone can do it differently. You don't have to do it how I do it. The whole point is it's personal, right? That's kind of what ooh, what did I do? I'm sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. Try to click on that chat. Yeah, thank you. Again, I wish I had it handy, but I don't. So I'll put my email in the chat if you don't already have it. And then I can send you kind of my template for those commissioning and collaboration agreements. Anyway, be happy to just open things up to chat. If you have specific questions for me, or things you want to talk about that I didn't talk about, feel free. I'm here. I'm not the end all. I'm sure other people have really great ideas too. Yeah.
As a performer, I've had a couple situations where a composer would know some flute trill fingerings or multiphonics or something that I wasn't aware of. And my first reaction was, wait, I can't play that trill. And then the composer would, you know, through a medium, somebody in between, like, yeah, you can. Or another one who got, there's a whole bunch of a book full of multiphonics, and
right.
I was familiar with the book, so I decided I need to have this book, and it's fabulous.
Oh, good.
Fabulous resource. So I've as a performer have learned from composers too, which is really fun.
Oh, I love that. And you know, it's such an interesting the area of extended techniques, especially wind and brass extended techniques and fingerings and different builds and different, I mean, I have felt as a composer such question marks in my head, because I did one piece where I said, like, play your favorite loud, noisy, annoying multiphonic. And a performer came back to me and said, you need to tell me what to do. Like, what fingering, like, I don't know how to make multiphonics. Like, what am I supposed? I'm like, oh, okay. And then based on that, I put it in the score, right? The next person comes up. She's like, this doesn't sound good on my instrument. Can I do this other one instead? I'm like, yes, you can. And so now I think it says, like, play a loud, annoying, noisy multiphonic like this one, or one that you like. Like, it just keeps like evolving, and thank goodness. And I'm very grateful to them. Similarly, I remember I put in like timpani pedal changes in a piece, and one ensemble played it and was like, don't put those in, right? we'll do those ourselves. And then the next group that performed it was like, it would have really been helpful if you had the timpani. So, we went into this, and that's where here we are in the differences of opinion, right? But it's wonderful when we can learn from each other, and yeah, those like extended techniques and like how specific to get, and it's a very interesting, and I think it's so helpful, like, to have these experiences and to go not to the place that is easy to go to when we're stressed and under duress of like stupid composer or stupid performer. I mean, no one really thinks that, but like in a moment of feeling really vulnerable and like, what if I'm bad at my job? Our brains can go there so quickly because we're worried. So, yeah, how do I deal with performers that leave late in the rehearsal game? Can you tell me more about that? Like somebody who quits an ensemble, or can you tell me more, William, about that? Maybe not.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, go for it.
I've had a few just like drop out really late in the game, close to, like, I would say maybe 3 weeks out to the performance. And I've had to like scramble and find more people.
That sucks.
Yeah. So, I mean,
is it solo or chamber music, or like
it's usually
ensemble?
chamber music.
Was there a contract?
No contract.
I think a contract would help for sure. And a lot of contracts will have like I've had these in my, ensembles that commission me will have like a contract where, the deadline is this, and what happens if it's not, if it's late, like $50 a day less, or we're not necessarily going to be able to perform it or whatever. So, I mean, that could also be part of it, would be like, if for some reason you're not able to perform, then you have to get a sub, or, you have to at least offer to help find a sub. I mean, that's what they should have done. I'm so sorry. Yeah, so I would say contracts, and then, yeah, unfortunately, sometimes it's this game of sorting out. It's just like dating. Dating is mostly a game of who you don't want to be with. And I don't actually think collaborating is mostly a game of who you don't want to be with, but it is a tiny bit of that, is sometimes finding someone you're just not going to work with again. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. Yeah. Other questions or thoughts? Or
I'm kind of, and since organ is the main music thing I do these days, I'm kind of thinking from organist perspective. I feel like I've been doing a lot of one-sided collaboration in the following sense. And I'm not sure whether this is really the common thing for church organists to do per se, but I've gotten used to relatively freely adapting the music that I play. Some of it is just, okay, well, because of time constraints, you cut it off. Some of it is absolutely necessary because the that particular instrument can't handle what the registration's given or whatnot. Some of the other stuff is more subtle. Say I'm doing a setting of a particular hymn tune, but that setting had a rhythm for that hymn tune different than what the congregation is familiar with. So I'm going to change that rhythm around. And it's not sure how this, what lessons to take from that, but I think that gives an idea of what one-sided collaboration might mean to me.
I mean, I do think there's a kind of a Zen part of being a composer that I definitely try to get into, especially with sheet music sales, like, hey, I'm not going to be at every performance or rehearsal. Like, someone might do something to my piece. It's all good. My students sing Schubert and make wrong notes, and it's okay, and Schubert's fine, right? So, I mean, yeah, I think that's really interesting, and definitely sounds like, too, in the liturgical sense and with the variation of instruments, organ has kind of a unique place in that. So that's really interesting, and it could be something really interesting for you to talk to composers, who are writing for the organ and let them know about. So yeah, thanks for sharing
Yeah,
that,
and it's
Paul.
also that the organ is, at least it's often said, it's the one classical instrument which still has a strong improv tradition.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And actually, with you talking about theater stuff, what the try something once, that reminded me of the theater improv thing of just always agree with what the first person is doing, and I'm not sure what that would look like in I'm not thinking in a collaboration setting. That I guess that would produce some very interesting music, but it would also rule out a lot of possibilities too.
Yeah,
I think always agreeing or saying yes and what that would look like in a musical improv setting. And I'm not really. Yeah.
I am not an improviser like you, but I have done some improvising classes for I've been a student in these workshops for like contemporary classical music, and I think that idea of kind of yes and works very well to the sense of like you're not rehearsing, you're improvising, so we're going to work with whatever someone's created and then build off of it in what way works for me. But that's really so fascinating. Other questions or thoughts or things I didn't talk about that you think are super important? Because goodness knows, I don't know everything.
How do you decide how much to ask for a commission?
I love to go to, I'm sorry, was there more? I'm so sorry, I jumped in. Oh, I'm so sorry, you're muted.
I muted myself. A dollar figure. I mean, how do you decide how much to ask for?
Yeah, I love the Canadian League of Composers rates are super awesome. Less so for choir. I think they're kind of under. My feeling personally. This is my feeling. I think that their choral rates are a little low for American, at least, composers. But the Canadian League of Composers has sort of minimum rates based on ensemble size and length that are very useful, at least to sort of think about, and then by all means increase from there. There's also the New Music USA commissioning fees calculator. It's a little larger ranges because there's kind of only a few different buckets. So like I think anything like under 10 minutes is kind of one category, so that can be a little harder to parse. For choral music, Dominic DeOrio has a wonderful article about, or I think a resource on their website about that. A common number I've heard with choral music is 1,000 a minute for choral music, and then adjust from there. And I actually have this. I actually think I can pull up quickly. I have a resource list on my blog of some that kind of links to these. Let's see here. Can I pull it up really quickly? Of some of my favorite. Yeah, here we go. Some of my favorite resources, and then look, it's a conversation. I mean, that's like the short answer. The long answer is I think it's a conversation. At least that's how I try to approach it. And it's you have to think about what do you really need, and not compromise that, because then you're just going to feel bad, right? And that what you really need might look different depending on who it is, and that's okay. You're allowed to do that, in my opinion. I'll share, I'm writing a piece right now for my dear friend. We applied for multiple grants. We never got anything. She's having a baby this summer, and we just said, screw it. We're going to make it happen. So I'm writing. She's going to pay the recording engineer. It's kind of in kind, right? I can do that. But yeah, thank you. Yes. Know what your minimum is. Absolutely. Yeah, know what your minimum is and don't go below it, for sure. Ask for what you really want, and then just shut your mouth and see what they say, because they might say yes. holy smokes, they might say yes, right? And if they say no, we can't do that, they might counter with something that's like a little lower, but that you still feel good about, or they might be able to meet you somewhere with other things, multiple performances, the recording, some publicity photos, other things. You can also offer to add value added things in, like workshops or, you know, education components or things like that that might help them tap into different pools of available money, you know? And I think the biggest fear we have, well, there's a lot of fears we have with money, but one of the biggest fears is I will name a number and they will say no way and go work with someone else, but I really want to work with them. That's like fear number one, right? Fear number two is I will say a number and they'll be like, sweet, we don't have to pay her very much. And then I could have made more money. And so like, get on a phone call, get face to face, do your prep work before and know what you really need. Have a conversation. It's okay. Whoever says the number first, it's fine. It's not some showdown at the OK Corral. You know, name your number, be quiet, see what they say, have a conversation. If you need to think about it, you know, I'm glad we've had this conversation. I'm gonna sit with this and have a little, you know, time to think and about maybe, you know, whether this will work or not. Let's get back to each other in a couple days, you know? You can have ideas, right? Schmooze with donors. You can have ideas about how to fundraise. It could be for next year. That I think that's the other thing. If it's not right now, it might just not be right now. You know, like maybe they don't have that budget right now. And then you're like, well, what if we did it next year and had more time to fundraise? Like be proactive. It's not a yes or no. And that's where it's really important, I think, to get off of email and have these conversations in real time, because how much do you charge? I charge $7,000, and then you sit and sweat bullets for 5 days and wonder if they just are on vacation or if they're laughing at you. Move through that real fast. How much would you charge for this piece? My normal fee would be $7,000. Close the mouth, see what they say. Wow, our budget is $1,000 for the whole year, right? And you know what parameters could make it work? Could it be shorter? Right? Could it be for fewer people? Like if they have $1,000 to give you, what could you give them for that? If you're interested, or if you're not, then you're not, that's fine. Right? But I think it has to be a conversation, because it really begins, it's not like they're at a store and saying, I must have, I mean, sometimes maybe they have a program in mind, but it could be changed, right? What they really want to do is work with you. So how can we make that happen? Right? And if they had in mind, I want a 15-minute orchestral overture with 5 soloists in 3 months, and they can't do that at the price point you need, then the desire to work with you doesn't go away. So work on that. I would love to work with you too. I'm not able to do that at this time. But what I could do would be this. Or what if we explored this in the future? And those seeds that those have planted, no one's gonna be pissed about that. And if they are, you don't want to work with them anyway. So I don't know. That's a bunch of my random thoughts. Take them or leave them with a, yeah, grants. There might be some local ones you're eligible for. Yeah, coming with ideas, you know. Doesn't mean you have to do all the work, but being willing to do at least some of the work, or some of the creative brainstorming work, you know. Could it be a consortium? Do they know some other people? You know, ensemble organizers know other ensembles. Right? Oh, your choir can't afford me. What if we work together and got 10 more choirs on board? You know, so being really creative. Yeah, it's scary to name big numbers, but it gets a lot easier. Like, and then once you're really comfortable with your numbers and everyone's saying yes really easily, raise your rates so that you can make more art and have retirement. And also so that you can, when your best friend, right, and your grants fall through for the 10 billionth time and she's having a baby, you can say, screw it, let's do it. Because you want to like have your time to do your passion projects too. So, yeah. Do I ever do cold call proposals? That wasn't covered. Like in what way, William? Can you tell me more?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, like, do you just you see people, ensembles that you would really like to work with, and then you're just like, screw it, I'm just going to send them a message and be like, hi, this is so and so. I'm a composer. I really enjoy what blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
Would like to propose a collaboration for you or your ensemble. Have you ever done anything like this?
You can. Thanks, Kirsten. Have a good night. You can. There are some ways to hedge that ask to give yourself a better shot of having success. And that begins with building a relationship with them. It doesn't have to be years and years and years, but showing up for their events online, in person, whatever's happening and whatever's available to you, introducing yourself to people. Again, this can happen in the YouTube chat. It can happen after their live stream concert and sending a little message, hey, I love this piece and these are some reasons why, and I really loved your playing so-and-so. Starting with a connection that's just based in your like genuine, what did you genuinely love about what they did? Then like establishing a little more of a connection, inviting one of the performers or one of the ensemble directors like to a Zoom coffee or whatever you're doing, as appropriate for the location and all that. Like, I really love this concert, I love these things, or I've been following your work at these things, and I'd love to chat with you and get to know what you do a little more. And then just having like a conversation as human beings. It starts there. At that point, probably, if you are a nice person and asking them about what they do, they will probably ask you about what you do. And they will find out that you are a composer. And it could very well be that the idea to collaborate comes up naturally from them and you at the same time. If not, that's okay. You can then make your pitch either in person or later. Hey, it was so great to have coffee with you and learn more about your ensemble. And as I've been thinking about it, these things that you're interested in doing, it's really what I would love to do. And I would love to talk to you about collaborating on a piece. And it has to start there. I think the trouble with like a cold call where nothing has been established is that sometimes we get them a lot as performers and orchestrators and I'm sorry, not orchestrators, composers and organizers and ensembles. And so we want to do everything, but time is limited. And also, sometimes there's not necessarily a specific enough reason given if we haven't built that relationship for why this person is a good fit for us, Yay! Oh, the link is broken. Thanks, Drew. I will update that. So Drew just shared Dominic DeOrio's wonderful article about composing rates and choral commissions. So I think like it takes a little more time than like cold emailing like 10 ensembles, but doing this kind of work actually will probably be more, I just know from my own experience and the experience of my clients, is going to be more successful for you in the long run, because you're not just, when you're doing that, you're building more relationships. And even if they're not able to work with you, if you have built that relationship and they like you, they're going to tell their friends about you. The world is a real small place. And so if you can go deep a little bit with relationships, you're going to be more successful than going broad and shallow. And also, you want to find out if this is really a good fit for you, because like if I write really lyrical music and love to write songs about lullabies and babies, and then I love this singer's voice, and we start to have conversations and they're telling me that they are super excited to like sing about Medusa and Clytemnestra and murdering things, and that all they want to do is like performance art and all of this, then they may not be the person to collaborate with right now, right? Maybe they will be down the line. Maybe they'll know people I want to collaborate with. Still a good person to know. I still like them as a person, right? It's not no problem there. But they may not be actually the right fit for my project, and you want to know that first. You know, does that help? Yeah, great.
Yeah,
I know
perfect.
it's
Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, totally. And I will say too, if you go to my website, I have an ebook kind of about some of this. It's about pitching, and it goes into a little bit of that networking piece as well. If you want to go check it out, it's like a free ebook that I wrote up, kind of based on having a lot of these conversations with people and trying to help with that stage of things. So
Perfect.
yeah.
Sorry, I hope I'm not stealing the time. I just feel like I'm stuck between getting people I know who are reliable and they perform my music, but then the music doesn't like go on to another performance, or getting people who know me or maybe don't know me, but they don't want to do music. So I'm kind of like stuck in this
Yeah.
position, you know?
Oh, that's super frustrating. You can break out of it. You need to meet more people. Um, if you have
I've
not
been
done
trying to
this
go
yet,
to, yeah,
go for it.
I'm sorry.
No, say
I've been
it.
trying to like participate in other conferences or go to performances, NASA and things like that. It's
Great.
But then it's like the financial side of it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So figure out what can you do that fits in your budget, because almost everyone is doing stuff that is like, there's some discounts or there's some streaming content, sometimes like a couple weeks after a concert, or you can go to people's websites and watch their samples, you know, find something that fits in your budget to do. Um, and I'll also throw out, like, one of my favorite exercises to do with my clients is to have them start a big old spreadsheet of every musician they know. And if you open that spreadsheet up and leave it open in your computer or whatever you use for like 2 weeks, you will be amazed. You probably know more people than you think you do. So you can start by like going back through those people and reconnecting with people, and then yeah, expanding. We're always kind of trying to make more musical friends, but also keep the old. And that combination of sort of refreshing our pool of friends with following up, checking in, supporting people, just being a good human being, it's where all the magic happens. And the other thing I'll say with conferences is be sure to check out conferences or other things that are about performers, because one of the challenging things that can happen sometimes with composer conferences is that they're very composer focused, and then like the conference will have a budget to bring in performers to do awesome performances of things. Those performers might be great, but they may or may not be the same people who love to do new music and are looking for repertoire to do over and over and over again. So mixing it up a little between, this is one of the reasons why New Music Gathering is so great, is because it attracts composers, but it also attracts performers who just love doing new music. And I think that can be sometimes a little challenge with some of our other models where it's more composer led and really serves our need to like, let's get together as composers, let's get readings. It's super awesome. But sometimes we get very good performers, excellent performances, but they're not necessarily the folks who are championing new music over and over again. I know we're almost like at 9, but I'm happy to stick around and answer questions. Yeah, Martin?
I would just say, William, look for underserved instruments too. I'm a bassoon player, and I will tell you that the bassoon community has adopted about a dozen different composers in the last 10 years, just because we like their stuff and we don't get a lot of new music. So it's we have people that make their living now serving double reeds, even though they were never double reed players to begin with.
Oh,
Okay.
such a good point. And the International Double Reed Society is such a great place to share music and meet folks and hear great performers.
That's great. I think I will definitely send you some pieces.
Yay!
Start. I wanted to say, God, so many things. You speak so well on this topic.
Oh,
it's just
thanks.
wonderful to listen to that. And I was particularly feeling vindicated by some of your responses where I feel like I'm OCD about how we organize a concert and how we're specific, and really we're not even doing enough. Although we have a Trello board now that I at least do for
Ooh,
myself, if nobody
cool.
else, for our planning, because everything you said about communication is so true, and about getting things in writing about who's doing what and being on the same page. And I really love the comment about everybody's buy-in and everybody's willingness to work. But I also wanted to give in just a quick suggestion, everyone here, that so we're an all-volunteer organization. We do a lot of concert planning. We've had so many of these types of collaborations going on. Some have gone spectacularly and some have gone horribly. But if you ever want some experience in planning, we're always looking for more people to help us. We really need it as an all-volunteer organization, and it's awesome experience because you get to see everything we're talking about. Not that you all aren't doing some level of this anyways, but I think we're a great organization. We're also planning our next seasons, including right now. We're doing some planning for that. So if anybody's interested in helping with that, please give me an email. Get in touch with me, and we'll get involved. So okay, that's all I wanted to say. But thank you for the presentation. I think we probably cut it off in a couple of minutes, but I would say we could I could just stop the recording and we could just leave the Zoom meeting going for anybody who wants to continue the conversation.
For sure. I don't want to hold you up either, Ted, but yeah, if there are people who had burning questions, I am happy to stick around and chat and be sure you had a chance. And otherwise, great.
All right.
To
I'm gonna kill the recording right now, but we'll leave the chat open for as long as anybody wants to be here.
Sounds good.